Last episode, we virtually traveled to the state of Minnesota, where we learned about Governor Tim Walz's extreme action to remove medical care and reporting data on babies that survived botched abortions. Today, we connect with abortion survivors and their mothers, because there's no greater representation of what forced abortion looks like than those who've had the attempts on their lives. But as one of our guests and abortion survivors points out, behind every survivor is their mother. And what is her story? When we start to peel back the layers on the stories of abortion survivors, we uncover a vicious cycle of coercion and pressure enacted on vulnerable women who then are pushed into inflicting abortion on their children. Today, you'll hear from Melissa Ohden, the founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network. Melissa survived a late-term abortion and speaks out across the country against this injustice. We also spoke with Jessica Williams, a mom and nurse who was pressured into buying abortion drugs online to end the life of her child. But immediately, Jessica felt that regret and wanted to save the life of her baby. She prevailed with the aid of her local pregnancy center. Today, Jessica shares with us her experience and how she battled the odds to save her little daughter's life. From Exposed, Abortion in America, this is Under Pressure. What happens when moms are pushed to abort and their baby survives?
My name is Melissa Ohden. I am the founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network.
This entire series is focusing on something that seems to never get talked about in the United States, and that is forced and or coerced abortions, women being bullied into an abortion. And we're really focusing a lot on the women's side, but there really is no greater example of forced abortion in the United States than that on the forced abortion attempts on those that survive it. And you are the perfect person to speak to this, not just from your story, but also your mother's. So if you don't mind, I know a lot of people know your story, but there may be some that don't. Could you just give us a quick background on, what you've gone through, and then also tie in from your mother's side too?
Behind every abortion survivor, the baby who survives an abortion, there is a woman, right? There's a mother who went through that experience. We need to start there, right? Back at square one to say, hey, if you're going to talk about an abortion survivor, think about their mother. And so that's where it all start. My birth mother's story has come to me pretty organically over the years. There's lots of secrecy around unsuccessful abortions, whether they fail or women stop them or they reverse them. But in my birth mom's circumstance, I know there's lots of reasons for secrets. And really, the biggest reason is that they forced that abortion upon her at the age of 19. I want people to understand pressure and coercion happen throughout women's lifetimes, right? We don't get to go, hey, you're 18, you're safe. Man, wouldn't that be nice? But we need to confront this in our society to say there is something wrong when women are 19, like my birth mom, Ruth, and are literally forced at the hand of their parents to have an abortion. There is something wrong when women are in their 30s and 40s and in a committed marriage, and they are coerced and forced into abortion. This doesn't just happen in China. It is happening here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing up that point about the age, because we haven't talked about it yet, but you are not exempt from any kind of bullying into an abortion just because you're a legal adult. What were the sources of pressure for her to walk through that door, get the abortion, and how were you saved? How are you here today talking to us?
The pressure and the coercion look different from person to person. And again, I say that because I want women to understand that if they're looking at what happened to them and they're going, I don't know, right? Mine wasn't as bad as someone else's. There are various ways this happens. In Ruth's circumstances, I now know the backstory to that forced abortion. My birth parents were high school sweethearts. They were engaged to be married. He was a sophomore in college. She was a freshman. And, unfortunately, some things had happened, and my birth mom's parents weren't supportive of her relationship. This is terrible that I even have to say this, but they didn't like my biological father, and that wasn't through fault of his own. That their perception of him is what led to a forced abortion and ultimately what was supposed to be my death. We need to talk about these things. This is what happens. And so right here, they were in love, engaged to be married. My grandparents weren't supportive of that relationship. My birth mom, put yourself in Ruth's shoes. She's already fearful of her family for, lots of reasons from the past. And then here she is, finding out she is pregnant and knowing that they're not supportive of her relationship, of her engagement. And so within days, my grandmother sat my birth parents down, and people have told me they can remember the windows rattling from the yelling that happened in the house. And the overall message was, this will be taken care of. There is no other choices to be had. And so fast forward, right, she was then forced into a hospital to undergo a late-term abortion. And by force, I don't want to get into it. There are a lot of things I know, but I can tell you that this was not a choice. And I would gladly ask anyone who says they're supportive of women's choice to sit down with Ruth and look in her eyes and look at her pain still almost 47 years later and tell her that you're supportive of that.
This should be a no-brainer. This should really be common ground for everybody. And there isn't, oftentimes points of agreement between the pro-abortion side, abortion activists, and the pro-life side. But at the very least, this should be the threshold of women who do not want abortions should not be getting abortions. We could all agree on that. So, Melissa, then let's keep moving and keep going on from there. So, Ruth was forced to go and undergo this abortion. What happened with you? How were you brought into this world?
Ruth underwent the most common abortion procedure back in the 1970s, a saline infusion abortion. And, that type of procedure had a high failure rate. That's one of the reasons why they don't perform it routinely anymore. I find it somewhat fascinating that, Democrat politicians, their response to me if I testify is like, well, that isn't performed routinely anymore. How dismissive, right? How disrespectful. And, you're telling me what we know to be true, which is you stopped doing it because it didn't end lives as often as you wanted it to. So, it was a horrific procedure, and not just for the babies, but for the women. Ruth has shared her story with me many times. And, I know how painful physically and emotionally and mentally and spiritually it was for her. That procedure should have lasted about 72 hours, but we know through not just her account, but through my medical records, that it lasted for 5 days. So they remove some amniotic fluid, and then they inject this toxic salt solution back in to induce the death of the child. So, making sure that they're poisoned and scalded from the outside in. And think about this procedure lasting for days. You can read some of those stories in the Philadelphia Inquirer. They had a series back in 1981 called the Dreaded Complication Series, and it is a hard read about women's experiences and the babies, but that's what Ruth and I went through. And, when we talk about sort of these lies that are kept about abortion, coercion and force is one of them, abortion survivors are one of them, and really the threat to women's health is another one. And I now know that when that abortion was taking so much longer than they expected, they started to fear that Ruth was going to lose her life in that abortion. I mean, it's like something out of a movie, truly. Her twin sister, made her way into the hospital secretly, trying to remove her from the hospital. And they said, right, it's too late. It is too late. The abortion is going to, be successful, and you are, you were going to put her in danger by trying to remove her. But she was already endangered by that abortion.
And you mentioned that her mom was head of nurses. Was she there and present at the hospital?
Yeah, this is the stuff where people sort of scratch their head and go, what? She's got to be making this up. I mean, I wish I was, right? I wish that I didn't know the things that I know about abortion. I wish that these things hadn't happened in our family. My maternal grandmother, so Ruth's mom, was an OB nurse. She was a nurse educator, so oversaw the education of many of the nurses, their training there at St. Luke's Hospital. She had a lengthy history of supervision and education in the medical field. And you would also have found them, though, sitting next to your family at church every Sunday. And I think this is what people have to start to wrestle with. These are the stories that are being lived out in our communities. We can't just look at somebody and go, oh, well, it must be just them that this has happened to. No, it's happening in families where there's a background of faith. It's happening in families where, they have the scientific background for when life begins. But yet here we are.
Mm-hmm. So Ruth's mom was there and present, and as we know, she was the driving force behind all of this. How was it that you were saved then and given medical care?
So that abortion lasted 5 days, and as you can imagine, the intent was for my life to end. They thought my life was going to end, and on the 5th day, when they finally induced her labor successfully, I was delivered as a quote-unquote live birth. But that was not the intended outcome. And, I know that at that hospital, babies were left to die and to be picked up later as medical waste. I mean, I always kind of stumble when I talk about it because it's really awful to have to talk about. I've met nurses who have apologized to me because they were there when other babies survived and they left them in the utility closet in buckets of formaldehyde, put the last name on there for them to be picked up later as medical waste. I never made it to a utility closet. I'm grateful for that. But I know by looking at my medical records, I was nearly dead within about 5 minutes. And, I don't know how long I was laid aside, but what I do know is that my grandmother was there and told the other nurses to leave me to die. And, we've heard a lot about brave people over the years who intervene in my life. But in recent years, after my memoir came out a few years ago, I heard from a nurse directly who received me in the NICU when a nurse rushed me in there. And it's tough because now I have to piece together the story through the eyes of medical professionals and then tell that to Ruth, right? And then we start to piece together just so many secrets. I now know from that NICU nurse that when I was rushed in, my grandmother followed her in and told those nurses to never tell my birth mother that I had survived that abortion.
Whoa.
This is the stuff that Ruth and I have had to live with. And, I would ask people to just put themselves in our shoes when they're talking about abortion and, enshrining it and how it's this right and this choice and something we all need. Have you heard anything in what I've had to say that would tell you that this was necessary or good?
Both you and your mother did not have a choice. And yet you are both now survivors and really working through all of this. And my hope is through this entire podcast that people can hear stories like yours and other women that are sharing, and wherever they are on this continuum, if it's preventative to where they can understand what the signs of abortion coercion or forced abortion are, or if they're in the middle of it and they're just trying to understand how to resist the pressure, or if they're on the other side and they need healing. That's why this is so important. And that's why your story and sharing all of these details, they're so important so people can see themselves in that and understand.
Well, and I think an important point as well as we talk about coercion and force, so many stories are full of both implicit and explicit messages when it comes to that. But I want to acknowledge the fact that even after a baby survives an abortion, women are still coerced to make a quote unquote decision about that survivor. We see that talked about. Governor Northam, back in 2019, had that infamous line, you know, if a baby survives an abortion, we're going to lay them aside and a conversation will ensue. Well, who in their right mind, first of all, should be having a conversation about what you're going to do with a human life? But secondly, when a woman has gone through an abortion and physically, emotionally, mentally is impacted by that, who in their right mind would say, hey, mother, your baby survived your abortion. P.S. We never informed you that this might happen, right? That abortions can fail. So we didn't tell you that, but guess what? It happened. And, you know, what do you want to do about it?
Oh, exactly. No, that's absolutely true. And I mean, you talk about the point that the women oftentimes don't know, you know, more often than not, don't know that babies can survive abortions. They're not told that necessarily. And I think about this a lot because there are two types of groups of people when we're talking about pro-life or abortion that exist that are never factored into the abortion activist mindset. And that's the women that are bullied or forced into abortion and abortion survivors. So what is it that you say to people, to these skeptics, when they tell you that there is no such thing as an abortion survivor? There's no such thing as a coerced abortion.
Well, the first thing I say is, well, have you ever actually sat down and listened to someone? I mean, I see that a lot on social media when we'll share a survivor story or, you know, a mom story, say, who stopped her abortion. We'll have abortion activists who will go, oh, you know, they're just fake. You guys are these figments of the Republican machine made to restrict women's reproductive rights. And we'll just simply say, did you listen to their story? And the response is no, because it's fake. Don't tell me it's fake. Don't tell me it doesn't happen until you've sat down and listened to our story or read through the research. I mean, this is ridiculous. And I think it's heartbreaking that we have policy decisions made. We have political platforms being built around this without any acknowledgement of the stories and the data that tell us a different story. Our culture should be furious about this.
Agreed. Like I said, I mean, this really should be a common ground issue. And I do think, you know, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, when you had more of a presence of quote unquote, pro-choice, abortion advocates, there was more of a receptiveness to understand this. But now, like you said, they're not even listening to the women. They're certainly not believing them. They're not, I mean, you have medical records. There's actual government data on survivors that are born alive. So is there any amount, or is it just ideology trumps everything?
I think it is ideology trumps everything. And listen, I mean, if somebody is listening and they're like, oh, shoot, it's me. I mean, first of all, thank you for listening to this podcast, because that would tell us you have an openness to, you know, reality and truth. But, you know, the fact of the matter is there's some pretty significant cognitive dissonance that is going to impact people if they open themselves up to the data and the story. So I understand essentially the protective nature of, you know, building a silo and putting walls up. But at some point, you've got to knock those walls down, because it is impacting your life. It is impacting your community. It is going to impact generations to come. And so, like, we have to be willing to deal with the cognitive dissonance.
Well, I mean, you brought this up, and, you know, as important, and they are, as personal stories and anecdotes to share on this are, there's hard data on this, actual medical records and government data. So what do we specifically and scientifically know about the survival rates of babies that have undergone second or third trimester forced abortion attempts on their lives?
In the United States, we don't have strong reporting. And the abortion industry and lobby admitted years ago that they didn't want to see these kind of things reported. Dr. Willard Cates out of the CDC has some pretty epic quotes about this, right? Saying, well, listen, there would be such a public clamor, right, if these kind of numbers were reported. So years ago, the CDC identified, 400 to 500 live births after failed abortions. If you do a deep dive, you'll read in other places that they were talking about 700 to 800 a year. Now realize that is just an underreport. What I can say is that there are a handful of nations that have solid reporting. Canada really has the best because of the way their healthcare system is set up. They are reporting those abortion procedures that fail and then the outcomes of births. We also see some reporting out of Australia. We see some out of the UK. Here recently, I've seen a little bit out of a couple of European countries. And what I can tell you is that consistently, that data out of Canada shows about a 0.2% chance of live birth. Now, when people want to show their true colors about abortion, we've had some pro-abortion folks who will say, 0.2%, that's nothing. Well, first of all, it's always something. It's something to the woman and the child that this is affecting. And also it affects other family members. It affects medical professionals, abortionists, right, nurses, all of these folks. But also we need to identify that year after year, that's a significant number of live births after abortion. So here in the United States, based on that 0.2% failure rate, which, by the way, matches up to what we see consistently out of Australia, that 0.2% failure rate, that looks like about 1,734 live births after abortion in the last reporting period in the U.S. And let me preface this also by saying that is surgical abortions alone. That does not include chemical, and that doesn't include at-home attempts to abort, which are being pushed now more than ever.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about that? Because this is really kind of the new post-Roe, post-Dobbs landscape. Why do you think there could potentially be more abortion survivors in the U.S.? What is it about the current culture of abortion and really the danger of the proliferation of the drugs just kind of peddled all over the country that could really result in this?
Yeah, meta-analysis tells us that chemical abortions have a significant failure rate. We've looked at statistics that will tell us, anywhere from a little over 1% to 7%, but I've seen research studies with significantly higher numbers. And, the abortion industry, every once in a while now, because we've been talking about it at the Abortion Survivors Network, and even the Washington Post included a story this year that included a woman who experienced 2 different experiences with abortion drugs failing that then led her to seek a late-term abortion in New Mexico to end that baby's life the 3rd time. And so when we talk about born alive infants and abortion survivors, yes, people tend to think about late-term, folks like me, but I need people to understand that a lot of times we aren't even catching the fact that a baby has survived a chemical abortion and supporting that woman going through it medically, answering the questions that she has, right? Helping her to understand there's still hope for her baby and for her, that she doesn't have to have a follow-up abortion and then another follow-up abortion, right? This is what true care and support to someone looks like. So we know that women are continuing pregnancies right now. They might go to a pregnancy center if they're one of the lucky ones and have an ultrasound and know that there's support for them. But then we want them to know they're not alone. We can connect them with other women who are going through that right now. That's part of what we do at the Abortion Survivors Network. But this is a public health epidemic, if I'm being honest.
And I don't think we know the full scope of it at all yet. Some of the data that you shared, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's not even taken into account the last 2 to 3 years that, with the Biden administration using the COVID-19 pandemic to say, okay, you don't have to have an in-person doctor visit when you're getting these abortion drugs. You don't have to have an ultrasound or labs done or any of these medical, safeguards. Heck, you don't even really have to have a telehealth like screen. You just need to give your information. The drugs will be mailed from somewhere. You know, we've seen the New York Times focus on stories on these pill packing parties from one blue state into a pro-life state, really just like unregulated. And I can only imagine that there's going to be a severe lack of data when you've got a bunch of women DIYing their abortion at home, and what that means for survivors of abortion,
Right.
failed abortions, that kind of thing.
That's a significant concern for women's health and the health of that baby. When we think about and look at those numbers for the failure rates of abortion drugs, when you reach about the 10-week mark, the quote-unquote successfulness or effectiveness of abortion drugs dramatically reduces. And so the likelihood of those drugs failing is much higher. I mean, I've seen the back end of what happens when we don't deal with this as a society. This is what I deal with every single day because we have never faced it.
Kamala Harris's pick of the governor of Minnesota, Tim Walz, he has taken a lot of extreme actions on coercion, on born alive survivors. Do you want to talk a little bit about what his abortion fanaticism and how he revolutionized and kind of changed for the worse Minnesota?
Yeah, his reputation speaks for itself. And, you know, the brief way I could say this is there's nothing Minnesota nice about what Tim Walz has done to my population of abortion survivors. They have had a history of born alive legislation. You know, they reported it. They had protections in place. But under his leadership, everything has changed in Minnesota. You know, we've seen pregnancy centers attacked. We have seen all the pro-life laws being overturned. We see that born alive legislation was repealed. And so those reports that used to identify my population, those people who should have been protected in the first place, but then were at least, right, we were at least reporting it. They were supposed to be being provided medical care, but none of that was good enough for him, right? He needed to expand abortion legislation, repeal everything, and abortion survivors were sacrificed at the altar of that. And so now, no reporting and no protection. And I can tell you that I see this state after state where they are aggressively expanding abortion, unrestricted, unregulated. They're also sacrificing abortion survivors time and time again. And I can tell you that my inbox is full of survivors, and some of them from Minnesota right now, even just today. And we should be furious that any state would do this to any person.
Well, exactly. And if you think about the individual circumstances of these children that are born alive from abortions, it's horrific. It's barbaric, the stuff that is happening. I know you spoke and connected with a young woman out of Minnesota who went to get a late-term abortion. Can you just share a little bit about that and what they shared?
Mm-hmm. A woman had gone to the Planned Parenthood in St. Paul and was undergoing a late-term abortion that was taking place over multiple days. You know, the first part of the procedure involved injecting the dioxygen shot to the heart that is meant to stop the heart. And in the second step of the abortion procedure, right, they would have dismembered this kiddo. And they performed an ultrasound to ensure that the heart had been stopped. And they found that there was still a heartbeat. And folks can find this story. It's on YouTube. She has her face blocked out for, right, strong reasons. And she tells a story of how when she was going through this, the staff at Planned Parenthood said, hey, listen, we don't typically tell women this, but, you know, if your baby would survive this abortion, we'd break their neck. Wow. Thankfully, that kiddo survived that shot to the heart. And mom saw that heartbeat and had seen people out on the sidewalk and, you know, knew that there were people there who would help her and support her. And so that mom got to live a different story from then on. And that kiddo is now in grade school. And I can tell you, every time I get to hug a woman like that and let her know she's not alone and that she is not alone in this journey of parenting a survivor, it is the most meaningful thing I can do, but it never should have been that way.
Absolutely. I mean, Melissa, you encounter a lot of people who have undergone these very traumatic experiences, but particularly in reference to this episode and our focus, what is your message to, abortion survivors that may be listening, or what is your message to women who have encountered some sort of pressure, bullying, or forced abortion?
I think that the biggest message is you are not alone. When we go through this, we feel like we are the only person this must have happened to. And then we live in this culture that sends us the message that we must be the only person it happened to, right? Because we're being told this doesn't happen, right? Women aren't forced, women aren't coerced. It's a choice, it's a right. Everybody's happy. Babies don't survive abortions. And so we are being gaslit. So I'm here to tell you, you are not alone, and you don't have to walk on this journey alone. So whether it's a mother who experienced a failed or stopped or reversed abortion, or the abortion survivor, or a family member, we're here for you. We have so many resources and supports. We are here to listen. We are here to share your story if you feel like you want that to be shared. It doesn't mean you have to go on live TV or take a stage. We are here to be the voice for those who've been impacted by this until they can break their silence, or until the world is safe enough that we don't have to do that anymore.
That's right. And where can they go? How can they connect with you?
The Abortion Survivors Network's website is abortionsurvivors.org. We're also on social media at all those handles. Do reach out, even if you just have questions that you have, you've just been searching for answers for. We are here no matter what.
Jessica Williams in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Did you ever think that you would be a target of abortion pressure or abortion coercion?
I never thought in a million years I would ever be even saying the word abortion. So, no, I definitely did not think I was going to be a target at all.
And for those who are just confused, because I think oftentimes we think abortion is never going to intersect with our lives, or, if it did, it would be somebody else that I know. It wouldn't be me. So what do you say to that woman that says to herself, I'm never going to feel this pressure. I'm never going to have this happen in my life, but it happened to you?
That is one of the things that in life, those never say never, because you really just truly never ever know when or if it could be you. It was something that I was never going to have to face. I was never going to have to worry about. It was never going to even be something I even had to talk about or consider. And to not only have it there so present and to go through everything I did and the pressure, I never would have thought.
And Jessica, do you think part of the problem is also the fact that even though we know this happens at a really rapid rate around this country, like, it's not represented in like Hollywood. It's not represented in any stories, Hollywood. You don't even really hear about it, or people don't talk about it. That's been my experience. Is that yours as well? I mean, what do you think about that?
Oh my gosh. I get chills when you say that. It's so true. That's so true. There's no representation, no talking about it. You're right. It's not a part of any story or theme. We don't educate it. Even in, sex education classes, we don't talk about, hey, if you're being pressured, if this happens, if you become pregnant, and you become pressured, here's where to go, here's what to do, here's who to talk to. We don't at all.
Well, that leads me back to your story. So I'd like to just take it from the beginning, before this pressure even intersected in your life. Talk to me about what your life was like before getting pregnant with the child that you were pressured to abort.
Well, I was married with kids, and I was working as a nurse. I was traveling. I was going through a really difficult point in my marriage. We had already separated and then reconciled, and then we were getting ready to pretty much dissolve our marriage. And kind of during that time, getting ready to prepare to officially divorce, I did meet somebody, and things just happened really quickly, and I did become pregnant.
So you're separated at this time, and I think this is really important to point out, which possibly made you even more susceptible to the pressure that you're about to endure. But that's a period where you're in a separation from your husband. You guys are both estranged.
Well, it really, I mean, if anything, now when you're saying, hey, look, we're divorcing, and also I'm pregnant with somebody else's kid, I was totally expecting him to completely lose his mind. And initially he was obviously a little bit shocked, but then was like, no, just you just got to get rid of it, just abort it, and no, we're gonna fight, we're gonna make this marriage work. And I thought, you're kidding me. I mean, it almost felt like just almost like a sick joke or a prank, I wasn't expecting that.
So that was your husband's response. Had he ever tried to encourage you to abort the children that you and he had together, your previous kids?
No. We tried for years, actually, and we had actually endured a couple miscarriages along the way as well.
So for you, I mean, this is a child you're carrying, regardless of whether it's with your estranged husband or, the current father. So how do you feel when your estranged husband says this child isn't worthy of life, you need to get rid of it?
That maternal instinct just kicks in, and it's just that moment of like protectiveness. Like, wait, what? Like, this is my baby,
So then what happened after that, Jessica? I mean, what he says to you, look, you did this, now you need to correct it, essentially. And the only way to correct it is through abortion. Did he stop there? Was that the only time he brought it up? What happened in the days, weeks, or months after?
Yeah. So after that, every day after that it increased in intensity. It just was complete nonstop every day of that. You need to abort. You need to abort. The clock is ticking. You need to abort. Did you get the pills? Did you take pills? Like, begging, pleading. I remember, oh gosh, now just remembering back, I remember even having this conversation all late into the day and the night, and him talking about just do it and get it done and this and that. You have to save your marriage and your family. Why would you pick this guy? Why would you pick that baby over all your other kids? And, and I remember having like the first ever panic attack even. And I remember I had my first panic attack and threw up. Never in my life had I ever had any type of anxiety like that ever in my life. I was almost hyperventilating and could barely breathe, and, all the way up through the end. Everything, okay, it's not too late. You could go here, you can go there, taking me by the clinic, or, make an appointment. You got to follow through. You got to go to the very end, to even trying to get me to do late term. Oh, it's not too late to fly to New Mexico. Here's a clinic. Here's a hotel. Book your flight. Even through after he had moved out and we officially even divorced, he still continued. I would get notes on my mirror in my house. I would get Post-its, notes on my door, notes on my car, text messages nonstop.
And I think people who have not been through a separation or divorce, they don't really understand this element, but you can't break contact with someone like that because you have children with them. So you are in
Yeah.
contact with them, and whether you want to be or not, you have to be. So is it fair to say that any interaction that you were having to see your children, because you guys are co-parenting, he would take that
Right.
opportunity to bring this up?
Right. Yeah. And especially because, we obviously we live in the same city. And so, we'd have to see each other during kid exchanges and we did frequent changes, every week. So a couple times a week I'd have to see him. And yeah, if people would tell me all the time, well, just block him. Well, you can't block him because my kids are with him half of the week, if there's an emergency or if there's something going on, things with school, changes, for all those co-parenting things you have to talk about. And every time he would just take advantage of it, every time. Or during a kid exchange, he'd yell things out of the window. He'd yell things out of the car. He'd say comments to the kids. He'd have the kids coming, oh, Mom, are you going to do an abortion? Are you going to abort the baby? Or, and he'd tell them, and he would tell the kids all kinds of things, that, oh, she's picking that baby over you guys. And, yeah, she wants that baby more than you. Or he'd say all kinds of things to them. And they would repeat that. And literally my daughter was, I think she was like 6, just saying, oh, I hope you kill that stupid baby. I'm so mad you're having that stupid baby. And I mean, it's so sad. And, looking back, she had no clue.
So, Jessica, you do end up succumbing to that pressure. Why do you think that you caved to the pressure? Did you feel some sort of guilt?
Well, I pretty much was in what I called my torture chamber. I was in my room for about 1 to 2 weeks. Literally in bed all day, every day, unable to completely function, and just succumb to all this pressure and just listening to everything he was saying and dwelling on it and thinking about it. And I think for me, it came down to more so of like the threats of, him trying to, take my kids or try to get custody of the kids, try to act like I wasn't going to be able to see the kids again.
So you were in the torture chamber for 1 to 2 weeks. And then what happened after that?
So I did take the abortion pill, the first one.
How did you get it?
I got it in the mail, have it sent to a hotel that I was staying in one state, and go across the border to get it. And
was there any kind of medical staff, or did you just have it mailed to the hotel and then you picked it up?
No, just had it mailed to the hotel and picked it up. Yeah, and I never met with anybody. Which is really kind of shocking. I actually was borderline on like for anemia.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had some like spotting and the other stuff, they said, oh, well, you're going to be at a little bit of risk for some bleeding. You might have extra heavy bleeding or possible risk for hemorrhage. So if you bleed too much, just, reach out to us. Just let somebody know. That was it. And I was like in a little chat message.
Whoa.
Which is so crazy to think of. Yeah, just a little chat message. Hey, you might be at risk for bleeding or a little hemorrhaging or something.
So that was the only follow-up offered, was you can chat them or text them.
That was not even any type of video. It was all just like a little chat.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jessica, I think this is really important to highlight because you're not just a random person without any kind of medical background. You're a nurse. So did this feel like not only did you not want to abort, you're betraying what you don't want to do anyway, your values or how you view the world, but also your medical sense too, in a way?
There's that part of me that was conflicted in all of this too, because it was like, here I go saving lives. I worked in emergency rooms as an ER nurse and saved lives for a living. But here I'm about to take a life. Almost so out of body because it was like, how is it that I'm able to have these pills and this medication? This is crazy. Through the mail, that I never even met a doctor, not even a video call to a provider, that I have these crazy medications that I just got in the mail. And the fact that I was also very high risk for potentially hemorrhaging, possibly needing a blood transfusion, and it was so minimized, was baffling. Yet I still have all this pressure, like kept pushing me through and had me debating, that's so scary, to the fact that I was at such a high risk for potential blood transfusion. That is not just putting a Band-Aid on something. That is something serious. That requires hospitalization. That becomes a huge part of your body. That the effect that plays when you possibly need a blood transfusion in the future, or if something was to happen, that is not just, some little, oh, no big deal, like, you might need a little blood transfusion, no big deal. It was so minimized and played down. And then I was told, oh, it's no worse than a Tylenol, it's no worse than Tylenol. Tylenol is more dangerous. And I was thinking, are you kidding me? And of course, they don't know that I'm medical, but I'm like thinking in my head, this is what you're telling people? That's so wrong. You don't do that. Even as a medical professional, you are supposed to be transparent about medications. Anything that somebody is taking, you need to be very clear on the risk, the dangers, the side effects, all of that. And it was completely downplayed.
I think sometimes, though, it's this idea of, I'm taking an oath to do no harm, but I'm helping other people. And then we put ourselves last. And in your case, you and your child, your unborn child. But actually, in this story, it was your medical sense that ended up saving you and your child. So can you speak to us about that as well? After you take the abortion drugs that you got in the mail, what was it about your medical acumen that actually ended up saving you guys?
So I took the first pill. You got the 24 to 48 hours until you take the second. I sat there thinking about the mechanisms of actions, or the way that the pills work, and what pills I actually took. And I realized that the first part just blocks the progesterone. Well, I was a little bit further along, and I thought, oh my gosh, and I even remember taking how we prescribe progesterone to help people to prevent miscarriage. So I thought, okay, well, that's just to stop it, but what if my levels were high enough to sustain the pregnancy? And then I was like, wait a second, the second pill, that's the one that causes the contractions and helps to expel the pregnancy. So then I realized, well, the first pill doesn't actually kill the baby. It just blocks one of the hormones. The second pill is pushing it out. And then that's when it hit me that, oh my gosh, my baby is probably still alive. And when I take the second pill, then that's when I'm going to expel my baby. That's going to take its last breaths and last heartbeat outside of the womb. And that image of that, thinking, do I catch my baby in a strainer? Like, what do I do? And how do you look at your baby coming outside of your womb, taking its last breaths and its last heartbeat outside, and knowing that you did that intentionally? The visual of that, I couldn't. And so that's when I had to set out for an ultrasound and for a reversal.
Okay, so you said you go in for an ultrasound. Where do you go and what do they find?
My baby was alive, had a strong heartbeat, and my pregnancy was still potentially viable. And I was prescribed the abortion pill reversal protocol.
What did you think when you saw that your child had a heartbeat still, that your child was still alive? What was going through your head?
I just cried, and I think I've never wanted to save a baby so bad in my life. It's like, oh my gosh, and I apologize to my baby, and I still every once in a while, apologize, and especially even after she was born. I think from the moment I saw that she was still there, I would cry often and say, I'm so sorry.
And then talk to us, though, about the fact that you still have to encounter your ex-husband. So was he still, so I take it he found out that you saved your baby through the abortion pill reversal. What was his reaction to you saving your child?
Oh yeah, that he was not happy. You need to finish the job. You need to finish. It's not too late. Now, why did you do that? You could have just taken a pill and it would have just been done with. Now you're going to have to go to a clinic and you're going to have to pay more. And, he was set on me basically finishing the job.
So did his pressure last throughout the entire pregnancy?
Yeah. And it lasted throughout the entire pregnancy so bad that even after saving my baby and saving my pregnancy and going through, all the protocol and all the tests, it continued so much throughout the entire pregnancy that I still even made multiple appointments to different clinics. I would make it and cancel it, make it and cancel it. He took me to one of them and he was like, come on, let's go. He got me in the car. Let's go. You got to do it. Just blah, blah. I'll be right here with you. And the abortion clinic was on the same street as the pregnancy center, where I went to save my baby. And so I couldn't, I freaked out. I had, just another full meltdown, of emotional meltdown of, I can't kill my baby the same place I saved my baby. Like, what's going on,
Because there's so many women out there, myself included actually, who have conceived babies in circumstances that would be deemed less than perfect. Can you speak to the women who have gotten pregnant in situations that are maybe, not ideal or that people have looked at and chastised? Does that mean that the value of the child's life is any less? Does that mean that the child does not deserve to live?
Oh my gosh. Every life has so much value and purpose, even if it's not the textbook perfect, or textbook perfect situation or textbook perfect health. Everyone brings so much value. There's a reason for everybody to be here, and it's amazing some of the stuff that people do through all walks of life, no matter what their background or disadvantage or obstacles they have to overcome. Their purpose is so great. Their value is so great. And I just can't imagine not cherishing that.
Talk to me about when you saw your child's face for the first time. What was going through your head?
Oh, man. The first time I saw my daughter's face, getting to look at my baby, I just fell madly in love and appreciated. And I knew in that moment, I'm like tearing up as I'm saying this, it's just that I knew at that moment that little girl was here for a purpose and a reason, and everything that her and I had gone through for the 9 months prior was all for a reason. And I didn't know the bigger reason. I didn't know the bigger purpose. I just knew to tuck that in the back of my head that this girl's here for a reason. There's something bigger and greater that she's going to be a part of. So I ended up naming her Kaylee Grace. Her middle name, Grace. I chose it to name her after, it was a nonprofit that had reached out to me while I was going through all of this debating and dilemma and in my torture chamber and everything else. I had posted on multiple Facebook groups, and they had reached out to me and caught me in a vulnerable time and said, hey, can we call you to talk? And so needless to say, they offered so much help with me. They even threw a baby shower together for her, even as I was going through all of this pressure and, even And the entire registry for the baby shower was completely filled within 24 hours. And
wow.
then some. And then some. Yes. They said, "Oh, what do we do with this extra money? We'll get you diapers," or, and so this girl was taken care of before she came. And they really, truly helped pull me through. And so I felt it was only right to name her after their organization and to use that grace. And also as a reminder to remind myself to give myself grace.
So talk to me about Kaylee today. What's Kaylee like, Kaylee Grace like today? And what's her personality? How is she with the other kids? What's life like with her?
Oh my gosh. Kaylee, I just say she truly is that joy, that little extra thing, that little extra person that you didn't know you were missing. And she's just funny. She's a hoot. She's just so spunky and fun, and she's so beautiful. She's so smart. We all love her. We all love her so much.
And what about your children before that were being kind of co-opted to use this abortion pressure on you? How do they feel about their new sister?
Oh my gosh, they love her so much. And they start to kind of speak up and stand up to their dad. When he says mean stuff about her, they're able to say, "We love Kaylee," or "Don't be mean to Kaylee. That's our sister,"
Mm-hmm.
They love her so much. And I don't even know if they remember him saying the stuff that he said, but oh my gosh, everybody has stepped up to the plate. Everyone has stepped up to be just great brothers and sisters to her and to helping me. And, here I thought, okay, I'm going to go through this alone, but they have been such great help. They love her. They absolutely love her. They love to show her off. And we go to the picnics at school and they bring Kaylee and they show everybody, "Look at my baby sister. Look at my sister."
Kaylee's life is such a great example because she is a survivor, and she is emblematic of the abortion survivors that we are seeing nowadays. A lot of these survivors, when they have a situation like you had, where you have women taking abortion drugs from pressure through the mail without any kind of medical supervision, we're seeing women present at these pregnancy centers saying, "I didn't want to do this," or "I didn't know it was going to be like this. I didn't have informed consent. What can I do to save my child?" And Kaylee is just a symbol and a perfect example of someone who is a born alive survivor. How does that make you feel to hear that? Do you think that her life can be an example to others as a story of being saved in that way?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. And I do. I look at her as a survivor all the time. I look at her and I'm so grateful every day, and I have those moments, just random moments that I look at her and I cry, and I'm so grateful that she's here. And I tell her I'm sorry. And that's that's that grace part of her name, is reminds me, give yourself grace, Jess, and you got to forgive yourself. And that we're just so happy she's here and she's okay and she's healthy. And that's one thing that I love about her purpose and her being a survivor, is this girl went through a battery of tests, so many tests inside and out. Everything from blood work to ultrasounds to EKG, all of her organs, everything. She is healthy. She is flawless. She's smart. She's beautiful. She's healthy. And to me, she is that message of, it works. Abortion pill reversal works. Here's an example. Women need to be able to have that choice for, especially for example, my situation, being pressured and taking this pill and not doing something that I wanted to that I wanted to do at all, ever, I want women to have access to it and know that it works and that there's hope.
Yeah, well, I just want to commend you for speaking out on this, because it's something that is never talked about. And I want to commend Kaylee Grace, because her life is going to be an example for so many on what a survivor looks like today and that it's possible. So thank you for sharing your story and her story and being so brave to do so.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the accounts from abortion survivors and their mothers from across the country. Join us through this entire series to hear more accounts in depth, and join us for our next episode as we reveal one of the burgeoning pressure points for abortion in America today. What can you do when your doctor pushes you to abort your baby? We'll hear from people firsthand about their experiences and how they fought back. From Exposed, Abortion in America, this is Under Pressure.